Today I'm going to be continuing my build on my Mandalorian cosplay by making the left spat. Did the right one in the last video. There are free patterns up on Facebook. If you'd like, you can hit the link below and download some to do one of your own. And without me rambling anymore, let's just go ahead and get right into the video. I'm going to start off with all the base patterns 1, 2, 3, and 4. They're all cut out of 6mm thick EVA foam. I just use scissors to cut these out, and they do have registration marks. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see those or not because I did put them on with black Sharpie. And I'm gonna use contact cement to glue these together. How contact cement works is you apply some to each surface that you want to glue together. You let them sit for 15 minutes before you actually bond them. So joining these, the number 1 to the number 2, and the 3 to the combined 1 and 2, and finally the 4. With some of the angles on this, it is a bit tough to get the seams to line up straight, but you just kind of have to wrangle and force it, unfortunately, to get it there. And the shape's a little funky before you use a heat gun to finish rounding it out. And sometimes you can skip heat gunning on certain projects. I wouldn't advise that on this one. My heat gun is just a cheap dual setting heat gun. It's relatively inexpensive. The tip of it does get very hot, so anytime you use something like a heat gun, you need to exercise caution so that you don't end up injuring yourself in the process. And with that, you can see it looks much better. Next, I'm taking some 2mm thick EVA foam, and I'm using my X-Acto knife to cut out a 3-inch wide strip of it. After that, I'm going to cut out a further 1.5-inch wide strip and 2 3/4-inch strips so that those can all be layered. The 3-inch strip of 2mm foam will be going down first, followed by the others on top, and that'll be the base for my pouch. Well, all the strips that I cut weren't quite long enough to wrap around the base, so I had to cut some extensions and use contact cement to glue them together. The 3-inch wide section I contact cemented on. Now, this isn't going to glue straight, so I had to use my heat gun and heat it down, and I actually forgot to record it, but it's recording for all this. And with the 3-inch strip already glued down as a base, I start with one of the 3/4-inch wide at the top, followed by my 1.5-inch wide strip of 2mm foam with the last 3/4-inch on the bottom. And of course these do stick up, so I do have to end up using the heat gun. The 2mm being so thin, if it's your first time, definitely be careful and just try to gently push it down. Any extreme, anything you do on it could stretch it instead of just press it into place. Next, I have my pouch pattern, which is 2mm EVA foam, and the pouch filler, which is just going to go in the center. It's 6mm, and once you glue it down with the bottom close to the 2 little indentations that are in there, you're going to need to put contact cement around the edges here so that whenever you fold it all up, it's going to look as much like a pouch as possible. And even though it was a little awkward, it makes it easy to line this up how I want. Glue the sides here down. And since I didn't actually glue this area down, it's still pretty loose and makes it look a little more natural, like it's an actual functional pouch instead of just a fake one that doesn't do anything. To glue this on to the combined 2mm strips, I'm just using some super glue and pressing it into place. I decided to take a 10mm wide strip of 2mm foam and just make a little accent on it so it didn't look so plain. Next I have the bottom accent, and I'm just super gluing it on too. And it's slightly off from the center, as that's the actual middle of my shin, and I want it to be in the center. The gap that is created, I just fill with some hot glue. I figured that was the easiest and most sturdy way to make sure that that is going to stay nice and flat and level on the front, despite the fact that the shell itself is sloping and curving behind it. I'm going to cut some more 2-inch wide strips, several. I'm going to layer one on top of the other. Each one's 2 inches wide, but the one that I put on the top, I cut 1 millimeter or so wider than the one that I had on the bottom layer. And again, back to the contact cement so that I can attach both layers. And I mentioned making it about 1 millimeter or so taller, and I want that offset to be on the top, not on the bottom, whenever I'm layering one on top of the other. And I try to get these ends as flush as I can to my bottom accent 6mm pattern piece that I've already glued on. Alright, with the bit of gap created here on the bottom, and same with this, just got the littlest bit of gap here in between the two pieces of EVA foam, because next I'm going to heat and crunch up and push the next piece in between here with various wrinkles and other nonsense via the heat gun. Back to the 2mm foam again. I cut it just a little bit wider than my gap, about 1 inch or so, at the widest point of the gap between my bottom accent and all the strips that I glued on the top. And with contact cement, I've joined these two strips together into one, so that I have more than enough to wrap around, because the sheets I'm using are 9 inches by 12 inches, and they're just quite frankly not long enough to wrap all the way around. And I don't want to try to piece it together halfway through it, so I just did all that now. With contact cement only on the edges of both these combined strips and this piece here, I can begin to join them together. I do obviously have to struggle a bit to get it shoved into that gap with the contact cement and all, but it's worth the effort since it does turn out pretty cool. Well, there it is with that glued crudely in place. And unlike up here, I'm gonna actually want to get some creases and some folds, and I'm just gonna glue all this in with super glue and trim this as needed. I gave myself more than I needed, but I'm going to trim it down as I go, gluing it on. So heat, stretch, super glue, shape as much as possible. To get some of the wrinkles a little more sharp, I went in with my heat gun at the end and just kind of touched that up as best as I could. Not too bad. Now for the bottom. Back again with cutting strips of 2mm EVA foam. These I just recut about 10mm or so, 8 to 10mm wide. I just guesstimated it. After that, same thing as much of the rest of this. Layer contact cement on the bottom around the actual spat itself, and then of course on all these strips. It is really annoying and frustrating and messy to try and put contact cement on something as small as these little strips of foam, but well worth it for achieving the desired result. From there, it's just a matter of attaching them and just stretching them around as I go with each successive one. I generally look at a picture of whatever I'm making too, and these just kind of slump a little on the sides and tighten up a little in the center, and that's what I went with. And all the excess that may be hanging off from that, I just trimmed off with a pair of scissors. Alright, now this is all together. I need to put in some velcro, just like I did for the right spat in the previous video. And I've got velcro and some scrap leather. I'm going to cut into squares and glue all this together with some contact cement. The velcro does have adhesive, however, I just find that it does not work as well as using it without the contact cement. So I always, even though there's adhesive on the velcro pieces, I do contact cement them together. The leather has a tendency to absorb a lot of it, so I'll end up doing that first prior to putting contact cement on any of the velcro or the foam itself, just to make sure that I have plenty. Sometimes it just absorbs it up and there's nothing there to bond. So getting used to your leather and knowing how much to use helps a lot. The bottom pieces left a bit of an overlap and left it a little bit vulnerable, so I'm just going to use some hot glue to help fill in that gap there, so that I don't have to worry if I bump this in anything that it's going to get cracked or torn or beat up. Now for a final once over with the heat gun, just to make sure that, everything is relaxed in its place, I don't get anything too hot. And finally enough of the build is done that I can start sealing this using gloss Mod Podge again, as was just shown. And as far as application, I just try to keep the brush strokes consistent for each individual piece so that each part will kind of stand out on its own. So for example, I'm going lengthways on the straps and up and down on the pouch itself. But whenever we actually get to the center part here, I just take a soft bristled brush and just kind of splotch it on. And ultimately I'll have to do several layers of this, and because the first one, the foam does absorb a bit, but after that it tends to start to build up. And after 2-3 layers, you'll have texture that when the light hits it, it'll look different. And once this dries and I'm happy with the texture, I'm going to take some matte black spray paint and just paint it one consistent black. And here that is. Not looking too shabby, but we need to move on to brown. So I'm taking a medium brown, it's called moccasin brown, and I'm just basically thinning it down to the consistency of water pretty much and brushing it on. And when this dries, you can't hardly tell. So it does take several applications until I can get it to look like something that I'm happy with. But that's just basically sort of a base texture for what I'm going to do later with an airbrush. And the whitish color you see me using here that I'm putting on the bottom is some sandstone. And lastly, for the airbrushing, I'm using the same color that I have used for all the brown dry brushing. But the process of airbrushing, all that basically does is help to even it out and makes it look a little bit less like me splotching stuff on by hand. This additional layer of brown here in these areas to help make it pop a little before I move on to highlighting and sealing these areas with my Mod Podge. I don't seal the whole thing with Mod Podge, but I do basically use it to highlight some areas like the pouch and the center strap and the bottom accent area. Everything else I pretty much just leave matte though. Well, that's it. That finishes the left and right lower legs. The knee rocket and the right spat are in 2 other videos. Next, I still need to finish the gloves, glue the thigh plates that I made in previous videos to the pants, and aside from that, there's just accessories like Beskar spear or whatever. Once I actually put the pants and everything together and put the back plate on and the rocket, I'll have essentially the full cosplay head to toe with the gloves and everything. But so only a few videos left finally. Pretty excited to finally have this finished and be able to put it all on. In the next video, I'll probably do the back plate and attach the rocket, glue on the thigh pads, work on making the pieces for the gloves, although I haven't actually picked up gloves yet, so I do need to do that. But almost done. And as always, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. And if you're not subscribed and would like to see more videos like this, please do. And as always, have a great day.